All right, here we go. We're on and we're live, and welcome to the this edition of Theology Thursdays, which is getting us ready for the 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time this coming Sunday. Did anybody read the readings? Did everybody get a chance to? Did anybody look at them?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. What I'll do, what I usually do, and I'll try to outline a little better this time, is I'll say a little thought about the readings, a way that I figure they're all connected together, and then I'll give a couple questions for us to think about as a group, and for anybody watching this to think about, and then we'll all kind of just talk about it and give our 2 cents before we depart. So and before I give my own kind of thought on it, the questions I have, I put on Facebook. I think the two questions I want to kind of give before we talk about anything is, what does it mean to fear the Lord? And the second question is, what talents has God given us, and to do what with? So just maybe to kind of think about it in the back of your head while we're talking about the readings. And my just real short idea of the readings is that the second reading gives us like a type of, well, for me, it seemed that the second reading gives us a type of directive, namely Paul saying, be ready. You never know when the end is coming. You never know when Jesus is going to return. And whenever it does happen, it's going to happen like a thief in the night, right? So be alert. Don't sleep like everyone else, and you'll be fine. And then the first reading kind of tells us how to do that in the form of saying the attributes and the qualities of a worthy wife, as it talks about, and I was kind of thinking about it in a more broader sense as far as we're all the bride of Christ, so we're all like the spouse, the wife of Christ as the church, and so the first reading gives us like ways of doing that, attributes and ways of focusing on certain things so that we can be ready, like the second reading says. And then the gospel, to me, kind of shows us an example. Jesus gives us an example of what it looks like, or of one example of what it looks like to follow that and to do that, and then one example of not doing that. So that was kind of how those things tie in for me. But so let me open it up now, and what do you guys think about the readings? Or does that make sense? You guys have a different on it?
I really agree with everything that you were saying. I pretty much, I guess it's kind of a cop-out to say ditto, but I actually read things pretty much the same way you did. I liked the idea of, I kind of liked the reading about the worthy wife. I know that it's not meant to be taken super literally, but every now and then, every time I come across it, I'm like, oh yeah, something to try to live up to, but not in a bad way, in a good way.
Sure.
And I like the idea of always being ready for Jesus. I think that in our daily lives, it's really easy to forget, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be praying, and I'm supposed to keep, the Lord in my heart at all times, and I'm supposed to be thinking about, corny as it is, what would Jesus do? The very simple, just the simple fact of every decision that I make is supposed to be a Christian decision, right? And actually I was talking to Felicity about this the other day, because she was saying how her Nana told her that God wants us all to be saints, and I was asking her, well, how do you become a saint? And she said, I have to just be nice to people all the time, and always being respectful, and always being kind. And honestly, it does sound like that is how you be a saint, So, I don't know. I like the readings, especially because we were just talking about that yesterday. It reminded me of St. Teresa of the Little Way. So.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Anybody else kind of feel the same way, or have their own kind of thought?
Yeah, exactly. And I think also Sophie used the word simple, but it's not simple because it requires everything that we are to be alert and to be doing. The good disciple, whether it's the good wife or not, is active, proactive, generous, looking beyond family, beyond my own immediate and personal concerns to the other, to the poor, to the needy. That can become very intricate and certainly life consuming. And consuming all your life, hopefully not killing you, but that too. Christians have been known to be martyred, and they still are. And so it is definitely a recipe for what it means to follow Christ, and certainly a wake-up call in Thessalonians that we are not to be comforted, or not the word comfort, but not to be not to assume that we are saved because we know Jesus. We are to be active. We have deeds to do. We have things to show that fear of the Lord, which, as I understand it from the Old Testament, is nothing but the belief and the total respect and awe of that Creator, not the word fear as we're afraid of. Right. And so it should fill our whole lives. And sounds simple, but it consumes everything, or can.
Yeah, and I really like that first. I really like that first reading as well. I thought it was interesting. As I was thinking about it, I always kind of in the past had kind of read it or heard it kind of literally, and not taking it as far as women should be this way, but men no. But just kind of like from a literal, like, oh, they were talking about wives should be a certain way, and then as I was thinking about today, it was like either they are speaking that way and they're totally not mentioning any kind of like anything about child rearing or anything about children, so they're saying that a good wife should do this on top of what was the norm back then as far as taking care of the children, which would be insane, like nuts, or it is speaking more in a kind of a figurative and metaphoric way, in the sense that everybody should be doing this, and we should be doing this for everybody else and for God and for Christ. But so yeah, I really enjoyed that. What was I gonna say? I was gonna say something about shoot. You kind of mentioned about as far as the fear of the Lord and what that means to you. How do you, Sophie and Jacob, how do you guys see that whole like fear of God and how we should fear God, or should we fear God? And
that's kind of problematic for me, because the Bible says to fear the Lord, right? I mean, it's there more in the Old Testament than in the New, but it's still in the New Testament. Like Paul talks about it, and we have hymns about fearing the Lord, and it's something that we talk about, but I don't know what that means. Like I don't want to fear God, I don't want to fear this loving presence in my life that I feel has guided me and I feel has taken care of me and protected me and my family and provided everything that I have. Like, I don't feel like I should be afraid of that. Then again, I kind of think of, it also kind of reminds me of, like, my parents. Like, when I was a kid, I really loved my parents, but I was a little afraid of them, and not, like, in a bad way, but, like, I didn't want to do bad things because I knew I would get in trouble. And so I guess if I'm thinking about fearing God, it's in that sense. Like, I don't want God to put me in timeout. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's
purgatory on earth. Yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Jeremy? Like, how do you see the whole fear of God thing?
No, like, to me, like, I always thought it was like a different sense, or I don't know. I definitely don't want my kids to be afraid of me. That sounds terrible. But like, just as you were talking, Sophie, I was thinking about, like, how when, I don't know, you go to like Yosemite or someplace and you're like on a mountaintop and you're just like this little tiny speck in this like huge thing, and like anything could happen, like a rock could crumble, and all of a sudden that's it, you're done, like, because you're so just tiny and insignificant compared to like this majestic, huge environment. Like, somebody was telling me about Alaska and what it felt like to be there, and maybe that's closer to what they mean when they say fear the Lord. Like, be aware of like relative size and like how amazing and the grandeur,
Right.
Yeah.
So Kevin's pastor did a.
This is Katrina, by the way.
Hi guys. My boyfriend's pastor was talking about the interpretation of the Bible and the original language of the Bible when he was saying, the text of the Bible where it says the awful Lord. And he's like, what they really meant was the awful, like AWE, like full of awe, and that's how you should look at it. It kind of reminded me of what he was saying, is that it's not really fear, but that fear that you feel when you're full of awe of something and you're just very overwhelmed with the brilliance of it.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
And as you're talking about, like, Casey and I went on our honeymoon a little while ago and we went to the beach, and we spent like a ton of time in the ocean, and I think that's kind of how I see it. I like
exactly.
The ocean is insane. It is nuts, and it will not because it has some kind of like malevolent kind of thing going on, but it will crush you. Like if you're not careful, if you put yourself in a bad spot, it'll totally crush you. And so the remedy to that is to, first of all, to view it as this awesome thing, awful thing, full of awe, and to respect it definitely, and then to get to know it, to like spend a lot of time in the ocean, and the more time you spend in the ocean with that kind of respect and awe, I imagine, because I haven't spent a lot of time in the ocean because I live in El Paso, but I imagine the more you'll be comfortable and have this kind of like relationship with the water where you don't push it too far, but you really kind of have like an interplay with like the awesomeness of and like the enormity and like the power of this water around you. It's nuts.
That's actually really true. When we were living in Pensacola and Savannah, we were at the beach every weekend. It's like it's what you do. And Felicity has that kind of attitude towards the ocean. Like she really loves it. And at first she was very fearless, and she just kind of went out like with this child's heart, which actually kind of reminds me of the way Jesus says to come to him like a little child. And she would just like try to dive in the waves, and just go for it. And then it happened a couple times that she got knocked over kind of scarily for her. I mean, we were right there. But then she developed this healthy respect, and now she knows where the undertows are and where the riptide is and where is safe and where is not safe, and she has like this knowledge of the ocean, and she respects it, but she likes it. I see what you mean. Like that's a really cool analogy, Nate. I think it's really
the word fear can be applied with all of that in mind, rather than be afraid of, as we normally use it in our English language.
Yeah, and I think that's something that gets lost a little bit. Sometimes, I don't know if this is necessarily a bad thing, but it could be. I mean, we talk about, and I think this is good, this personal relationship with Jesus, and Jesus as a friend, and God as a, but like, and I think that's probably better to do with Jesus than the idea, the whole idea of God, but like, I'm totally for that idea that God is this thing that you can't possibly describe, let alone imagine, let alone get any sort of handle on, and to kind of think of, like, I think sometimes we get caught into thinking of God as just like this buddy, and I think that's one aspect of God, this companion, this guide, but like God is, I mean, if we're thinking of God as like the creator of like, the nuclear explosions that create stars and this insane, that you can't even, how could you not, I think it can also be very beneficial to remember that sometimes and be like, oh yeah, dude, why would I ever want to mess with that? I would never want to mess with that. That's nuts. As much as I want to be a part of it and kind of have an interplay and an exchange with it, I never want to tick the ocean off, is basically what I'm saying. And to put a physical attribute on
that it doesn't. You can't take the ocean off. The ocean doesn't.
I know. But that's the kind of the language. I'm using weird language, right? But I guess I'm saying I never want to overstep my bounds in an ocean that I only understand a little bit of. Is I guess how I would say it. Right, because you can't take the ocean off. I don't think you can take God off, really. But
Yeah.
if I don't understand this power, I want to be very respectful of it. I never want to overextend my. I never want to go past what I should know are my limitations, as myself. I guess that's probably a better way to say it, rather than take the ocean off.
Called a healthy fear, having a healthy fear of something.
Kind of like Tower of Babel. I mean, I know that that's Old Testament and it's a myth, but, we believe that humanity overstepped their bounds, tried to, well, the story says humanity overstepped their bounds and tried to go where they shouldn't have gone, or tried to, be, like, mess with things they shouldn't be messing with, and as a result, it didn't work out well. And I think that that's what, yeah, like, going with what you're saying, like, that makes sense. Like, respecting the fact that we don't actually understand God, and we can try to, and we want to, but we should keep in mind that we don't understand God, and we're not capable of it. Like, God is outside time, God is outside physical representations, and no matter how abstract we think we can think, and no matter how, like, we try to imagine what being outside time is like, there's really no way for us to really get it. There's no way for us to understand what that is.
Sure.
That's cool.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it's very cool.
I think that applied to civilization. I think that's what that every time, like the myth of the Tower of Babel, every time a civilization thinks that they are above everything and are in control of life, the universe, and everything else, then humanity has tended to overstep its bounds, and then you have the fall of the civilization that has happened in history, civilization after civilization after civilization. And I kind of have the feeling we are on the verge in our civilization.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that last week when I was I don't remember what the why exactly I was thinking about it, but when I was saying how but there's like a natural way that things work, and we're kind of like we're kind of violating that a lot when we think of like food and the food industry and what we're putting in food, and as far as from the manufacturing point of view and the implementation point of view. Yeah, I think that's definitely applicable to today. And I'm looking at the second reading, and it talks about like the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord, and be watchful for it and be alert. What do we think? What do you guys think about what that is? Is just in general, but without kind of like specifying anything more directly. When you hear you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. What do you think of?
The first thing I think of is death. We never know at any time. I mean, death could come individually for each individual at any time without any warning, and we need to be ready for that. Christianity is waiting for the second coming of the Lord. For most humanity, that will be after they have already dealt with death, after they've already met the Lord at their own personal judgment. So I think that's, for me, that feels more imminent, and that's what I'm preparing for. I'm preparing for a good death. I'm preparing for a good meeting of my master whenever that moment comes.
Sure.
Yeah, that's actually how I always thought of it too. Sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
No, you're fine. You're fine.
That I always thought that the day of the Lord that sneaks up on you was death. And thinking about the afterlife is kind of uncomfortable, and because we don't know what's going to happen, and I mean, we know what the church teaches us, but really we don't know what's going to happen. And I was reading The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, which is a really interesting kind of meditation on that. And if you haven't read it, I suggest you do, because it's so good. And the way that it's about a man who is in a dream visiting the afterlife, basically. And I don't want to tell you more because I don't want to ruin the plot point, but it's very interesting to kind of see how a lot of people that were there in the afterlife did not realize that they were dead. And they did not realize that that's where they were, and that's what was keeping them from ascending to the next level, that they were not accepting of their circumstances. And I can really see that happening. I can see, getting wrapped up in the mundane minutiae of life, in the quotidian, just headache of life, and not realize that we have, died, and that we're, in that way, and the only way to prepare for it is to prepare for it, and to think, one day this will happen to me, and, one day this will happen to everyone I love, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, even though it's scary and nobody likes to think about their own death, really. I mean, I don't, but I don't know.
Well, that's kind of Buddhist, it's like a very Eastern kind of Buddhist way of living, right? I mean, they really kind of emphasize that. And every day you're moving towards your death. And at least in the ways that I've kind of heard it explained, it's not a sad thing at all. It's although it makes those of us who don't die and who have to go through someone else's death, it makes us sad. But that idea of moving towards your death, like it is the most natural thing in the world, because everybody does it, everything does it, everything dies and passes on and moves, and yet we have this weird tendency to be afraid of it. This weird kind of proclivity to not want to go through that most natural thing that all of us will have to go through. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I don't know. I kind of feel like this Sunday's readings are more or less straightforward, and really kind of nice to think about, but not too intense in the way of talking about much. But I was wondering if we could maybe go around and just give a summary, like we did a couple weeks ago. One thing that we want to keep in our minds as we go to church on Sunday, to help us, do what we can to bring something to the table on Sunday.
Hey Nathan, I just wanted to add one more thing on that, yeah. And that's like the other thing. I wonder, because I haven't read that book, but I did read the Chronicles of Narnia, and it's the same thing, right? Like the dwarves at the end, like they have died. It's the end of the world, and they have no idea, right? They think they're still trapped in a cave. So to me, it's not just that; it's also that, like, in some ways, this is heaven, right? This earthly stage, and it's a question of like how we live, the heaven on earth idea. Because if heaven is like being with God, we can be with God here. God is here, So that's the thing that I don't know.
Yeah, well, the whole message of Jesus, that his mission on earth was to make us understand that the kingdom of God is now, and it will be fulfilled later when we are totally in God's presence. But it is now, and the way we live, as Jeremy's saying, colors what that experience is. And I think we've all had moments, at least moments, of sheer joy, and what has produced that sheer joy and awesome feeling of inner peace and wholeness, more often than not, is when we are faithful to our call to serve others rather than ourselves. And that's the whole Christian message, in a nutshell, in my mind.
No, sure. I'm a huge fan of like analogies. I love analogies. Analogies are wonderful. And I think we lost Jeremy, but bye, Jeremy. Anyway, I'm a huge fan of analogies, and it's kind of cool that you're pregnant at the moment, Sophie, because like that's my big analogy for, like, I mean, I know that's other people's too, but I really like that analogy for this life and the afterlife, and the idea that the baby can't do too much to prepare for its next life as an actual person outside the womb, but the mom kind of does that, and the people around that too, the village around the child is kind of acting in that child's best interest, hopefully, and acting as if, because we believe it's true, right? Acting as if that child is already living, right? And if you didn't do that, then the child's chances of actually surviving past birth would be very small. If you acted like, oh, it's not really, I don't really need to do anything different. I'm going to wait till it's born to give it a life, and kind of the same thing. Like, we can't wait till we get older or wait till we die in order to to actually live like we're in heaven, we have to be doing that now, so that this 90-year or 80-year gestation period that we have, like C.S. Lewis talks about a lot, helps us to become the kind of people that are ready for heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that idea, and that's what it seems that the first reading is really talking about. You know, the spouse of Christ, the wife, you know, acting a certain way and doing certain things that, and also the talents too, behaving in certain ways that are befitting of being with God.
Yeah.
So I guess, yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Totally. Let's wrap it up. It's 6:02, so let's wrap it up, and then we can chat a little bit afterwards if you guys are up for it. But I guess my 1 or 2 sentence summary for myself walking into Mass on Sunday could be that maybe, I guess. This life is my gestation period, and how am I preparing myself to be born? How am I preparing myself to not just waiting to be with God, but how am I being with God even in this life, so that I can be with Him even more fully in the next? Maybe that would be my summary.
I think mine is similar to yours, and it's how can I, in my daily life, do the little things that I need to do to make sure that I'm keeping Jesus at the center of my life. I'm not very good at that, and I get distracted. So I think I'm going to think about that a lot this Sunday and in the future, starting now. How can I get there? How can I get to the point where I can truly, honestly say that God is the center of my life?
Cool. Awesome. Want to add a last comment, Mom?
No, I think I just said my last bit.
What's that?
I think I had already summarized saying as a Christian, I am called to focus on that Lord and on the other. And even now, the kingdom of heaven begins. And in my life, I can already see that those moments of joy have always been surrounded by others. It's never a me-centered existence if it's going to be joy-filled. And so that is what I need to continue doing, is serving others.
Cool. All right, sounds good. Well, I'll press the stop broadcast button, and that'll be it for this week. But thank you very much for joining, and I'm really hopeful that all of us can go to Mass a little more prepared and a little more ready to participate. And thanks for joining.